Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vana Chari Yamuna Tira Vana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vana Chari Yamuna Tira Vana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vana Chari Yamuna Tira Vana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jam Rishabhat Parman Saparivraj Katarishtottara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jam Rishabhat Parman Saparivraj Katarishtottara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhari Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद्भागवतम की जय। श्री श्री कृष्ण बलराम की जय। श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय। हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय। जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 22, text number 35. Ayata Yamaha Tasya Asan. Ayatayamas Tasyasan. Ayatayamas Tasyasan. Yamaha Swa Antara Yapanaha. Yamaha Swantara Yapanaha. Yamaha Swantara Yapanaha. Shinvataha Dhyayataha Vishnoho. Shinvato Dhyayato Vishnoho. Shinvato Dhyayato Vishnoho. Kurvato Bruvataha Kathaha. Kurvato Bruvataha Kathaha. Kurvato Bruvataha Kathaha. Ayatayamas Tasyasan. Yamaha Swantara Yapanayato. Say once a person touches 25 years, up to his 50th year, 25 years are his real prime youth, when he can enjoy life, his ability to comprehend the material world, manipulate material nature to his satisfaction, and his senses are also strong for him to engage in sense gratification. These things are possible for a person generally from an age of 25 to 50 years. Because the first 25 years of one's life is spent either under the control of the parents or the teachers. So practically the person becomes independent when he is about 25 years of age. From that time till about 50 years of age, his senses are strong and he can carry out various activities for sense gratification. He has gained enough knowledge about the material world to be able to manipulate it for his sense gratification. But after 50 years, what happens? One becomes an old man. And when one becomes an old man, the strength of his senses start declining. A person starts getting various kinds of diseases. Actually, Prabhupada says 40 to 50 years, one becomes a prime old man. And after 50 years, one becomes an old man. Once one becomes an old man, various kinds of diseases start setting in related to old age. Diabetes, arthritis, and heart problems, heart ailments. Digestion is not as strong as it used to be in the youth. All these problems, when they set in, gradually what happens is one's ability to enjoy one's senses starts decreasing. And as the ability to enjoy the senses starts decreasing, one's interest in sense gratification also starts declining. Why? Because simultaneous to the senses declining in their ability to enjoy the sense objects, simultaneous to that, one also starts becoming frustrated or fed up with the same activities of eating, sleeping, mating and defending. How many times will you do? Every day, 3 times you have to eat. And the same food you are eating, and all through your life, all kinds of food you taste. But gradually, that you get fed up. What is this? Every day eating. I'm eaten all kinds of different kinds of food. They are not giving me the kind of happiness, satisfaction that I am searching for. So eventually what happens is one's taste for sense gratification also, although the taste for sense gratification remains, however, still one becomes frustrated with the repetitive same kind of sense gratification and its ability to satisfy one's senses. Because as Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gita, Adyantavanta Kaunteya, that the sense pleasures that we get from the sense objects, they have a beginning and an end. And every time you eat something, you get some sort of, your expectation is very high. And you get some pleasure out of that eating, sleeping, mating and defending. But then it has a beginning and an end. So for a short duration, for a few seconds or a few minutes, you feel that happiness. But afterwards that goes away. So Adyantavantaha, so every time you keep repeatedly doing, what happens is one becomes fed up with the process of sense gratification. Now, although Swayambhuva Manu was having such a long duration of life, and he was also externally engaged in the same activities, he never lost the freshness of youth even in his old age. That's very surprising. Even within this 100 years of the earthly planet, within this 100 years, in about 25-30 years, we become fed up with sense gratification. Now imagine Swayambhuva Manu, 43,20,000 into 71 years, he is going on doing the same things, and he is not getting fed up. What is the secret? What could be the secret? The secret, as it is being mentioned here, that the kind of activities he engaged, how he engaged his senses, Shinvato dhyayato Vishnoho, Kurvato bruvataha kathaha. He engaged all his senses in the service of Lord Krishna, of Lord Vishnu. And therefore, although his senses were engaged, ears were still hearing, tongue was still tasting, eyes were still seeing, nose was still smelling. But what were they doing? They were not, the eyes were engaged in seeing the form of the deity of Krishna. Ears were engaged in hearing the transcendental pastimes, qualities, holy name of Krishna. The tongue was engaged in tasting Krishna Prasadam and in chanting Krishna's holy name. And his sense of touch was engaged in touching the devotees and the lotus feet of the Lord. So like this, the sense objects were engaged, but then they never lost the freshness of youth. So, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, Prabhupada gives 2 wonderful examples. One Prabhupada says is, as freshly prepared food is very tasteful, but if kept for 3 or 4 hours becomes stale and tasteless. Food, when it is hot, it is very tasty. Once it becomes cold, it will lose the same taste. And you keep it for 5-6 hours, or that it will become stale, and nobody wants to eat stale food. So the existence of material enjoyment can endure as long as life is fresh. But at the fag end, everything becomes tasteless and everything appears to be vain and painful. Any old person you go and talk to them, this is the same experience they will tell. They will tell life has become vain and painful. That same body which used to give them so much pleasure in their youth has now become the source of pain. The same senses which used to give them happiness has now become the source of distress. And they feel their whole life is become a waste. They have done so much for themselves, for their children, and so many things they have done. But at the end of life, everything feels that meaningless, that everything is meaningless. This is a common thing. You go and ask any old person. It may be a small man, it may be a big man, it may be a president of the country, whoever it is. Any person you go and talk, their experience will be the same at the end of their life. So, food may become old like that. When food becomes old, it may become stale like that. However, Prabhupada gives another example. In the case of a devotee, what happens? So, in the case of a devotee, as it is stated in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, Udyan Astan Ayur Harati Vaipumsam Udyan Astancha Yannasau. The sun, when it rises, Udyan Astan, when it rises and it sets every day, Ayur Harati Vaipumsam, it takes away, it snatches away the lifespan of that individual. Every day the sun rises and the sun sets. What is actually happening? One day of our lifespan has reduced. If I am going to live for 100 years, then in that 100 years, when the sun rises and sets, one day has got reduced. So I will live only for 99 years, 364 or 63 days, whatever it is. So that much my lifespan is reduced. So every person in this material world, whenever the sun rises and sets, his lifespan keeps reducing. Tasyarte, except for one person. Who is that person whose lifespan is not reduced when the sun rises and sets? Tasyarte yat kshanonita uttama shloka vartaya. Whose yat kshano nitaha, whose every second of life is nitaha, is engaged or it is spent in uttama shloka vartaya, in topics related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is glorified in the best, in the choicest of the verses in the Vedas. So therefore, a person, whoever is engaged in Krishna's service, for him, the sun's effect of taking away the lifespan is not acting upon him. So one may say, how is this possible? Because even devotees die. Even devotees have to give up their body. Even devotees grow old. Is it not? Even devotees grow old. Devotees also die. Nobody is free from death in this material world. So how is it that the earth is not taking away the lifespan? Because when the sun takes away the lifespan, that's because the sun, when it has its effect of taking away the lifespan of an individual who is a conditioned soul, who is not engaged in Krishna's service, what happens is, as it is described by Prabhupada, life as it goes on becomes stale. The freshness of youth keeps declining. It keeps reducing as time goes by. Frustration takes place in the heart of the individual. Whereas in a devotee's life, although externally the body may be growing old, externally he may be becoming closer to death, still the devotee, what is happening? He experiences continually the freshness of the youth. In his youth, what kind of happiness he used to gain by chanting Hare Krishna, as he grows older, that happiness only increases. The great pleasure, the great bliss in honoring prasadam, what one used to experience in one's youth, in old age, that bliss only increases. The happiness that one experiences in reading Srimad-Bhagavatam and Srimad-Bhagavad-gita in one's youth, as one engages in reading the pastimes and the activities and the qualities of Krishna, as we go on reading, our bliss in reading those pastimes and activities and qualities of Krishna only further increases. So although the sun is having its effect on the material body, still the person is, in terms of experience, the person's experience only becomes fresher and fresher. It doesn't reduce. And a devotee, when even though he grows older, his energy and his passion to engage in devotional service to Krishna never reduces. It only grows more and more. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, there is a description in the 10th canto about the Yadavas. The Yadavas, they were all living in Dwaraka with Krishna. And there were many, many personalities like Krishna and his contemporaries, like Uddhava were there. They were all his, Krishna's contemporary, they were his peers. And then there were so many people who were junior to Krishna, Krishna's sons, like Pradyumna, Samba, etc. And then there were his Krishna's grandsons, like Aniruddha and others. So the whole Yadava kingdom was composed of huge, innumerable people who are all descendants of Krishna. Not only Krishna, even Krishna's contemporaries, their descendants also were there. And not only were these people there were also elders, like the father and mother of Krishna, Vasudeva and Devaki. Not only the fathers of these personalities, there were also the grandfathers, like Ugrasena and others. So you can understand from this that there are grandfathers, fathers, then Krishna and his contemporaries, then their sons, grandsons. How many generations? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 generations of people were there living in Dwaraka at the time of Krishna. So there were very old people. You can imagine when Aniruddha was about 10-20 years old, if Aniruddha was 10-20 years old, his grandfather is Krishna, and Krishna's grandfather is Ugrasena. So how old Ugrasena would have been? So very, very old. But although Ugrasena was the oldest person in that family there, Yadava clan, still he was ruling over as the king of Dwaraka. So we can imagine there were a wide gamut of different generations of people there in Dwaraka at that time. Now the interesting thing is, although Dwaraka was filled with all these people, generally what happens in any country or state or city, if you have a lot of old people, then you need to have a lot of infrastructure to support them. You need to have hospitals, you need to have hospices, you need to have elderly care and all those kind of things. But in the case of Dwaraka, what it is said is, Tatra pravayasopyasan yuvano ati balaujasaha. It is said, Tatra pravayasopi. Vayasaha means elderly. Pravayasaha means very, very old. Tatra pravayasopi. In Dwaraka, even though there were people who were extremely old, very, very old, elderly people, senior people were there. Tatra pravayasopi asan yuvanaha. Although they were so old, still they were exactly like yuvaks. They were like yuvano. They were exactly like youth of the youthful people of their time. And ati balaujasaha, their bodily strength and the sense and their strengths of their senses were not diminished at all. Pibanto akshayir mukundasya. Why? Because pibanto akshayir mukundasya mukamboja sudam muhuhu. Because with their eyes, akshayi, what they were doing, they were drinking a nectar. They were drinking an amrita, which was keeping them strong and youthful. The devatas also, they drink amrita to keep themselves healthy, so that they don't fall sick, they don't grow old, their senses are strong for them to engage in sense gratification. So, but then the amrita which the devatas drink is available only to them. The people of the earthly planet cannot access that. So the Dwaraka, residents of Dwaraka, the Dwaraka Vasis were also drinking a kind of amrita, different amrita, not the amrita which the devatas were drinking. The Yadavas were drinking the amrita, akshayir. Akshayir pibantaha, with their eyes they were drinking that nectar, that amrita. What was that amrita that they were drinking with their eyes? That is, mukundasya mukamboja sudham muhuhu. Sudha means that nectar, the amrita. The sudha that they were drinking with their eyes, akshayhi pibantaha, what they were drinking was mukundasya mukhamboja. They were every day drinking muhu, repeatedly, the nectar of the lotus face of Mukunda Krishna. And by constantly, every day, repeatedly, again and again throughout the day, seeing the lotus face of Krishna, they retain their youthfulness and the strength of their senses. Not just strength. Atibalo ojasaha. Bala and ojas. Bala means physical strength. Ojas means strength of the senses. Both of them, for the Dwarakavasis, it was ati, means they were especially strong, bodily and in terms of their senses. So, if somebody becomes a devotee of Krishna, simply by drinking in the lotus face of the deities, simply by drinking in through the years the pastimes and the qualities and the instructions of Krishna from the Bhagavad-gita and Bhagavatam every day, every moment, repeatedly, what happens is our freshness of the experience of Krishna consciousness will only grow fresher and fresher. It will not diminish. And this is not something which is one or two people experienced, or maybe this is some new phenomenon. No. Even Swayambhuva Manu, at the beginning of the creation, at the beginning of the day of Brahma, even he experienced the same thing. So you can imagine, if right from the beginning of the day of Brahma, which is one day of Brahma is 43,20,000 into 2,000 years. So right from the beginning of the day of Brahma, people have been experiencing the same reality. If we every day engage in chanting Krishna's holy name, if we every moment of our day is filled with Krishna's activities, service to Krishna, hearing about Krishna's pastimes, hearing about Krishna's holy name, and hearing about Krishna's qualities, hearing Krishna's instructions, every moment if we spend, what happens? Our heart will always remain youthful and young, although body may grow old. And at the time of death, what will happen? We will blissfully, not painfully, blissfully we will step into the spiritual world. Just like about Narada Muni, it is described, when death came knocking at the door of Narada Muni, Tadit Saudamani Yata. Just like simultaneously, lightning, when it strikes, it is simultaneously accompanied by light. There is illumination which accompanies lightning simultaneously. When lightning strikes, you don't have to wait. Oh, lightning has struck. Now after some time, illumination will come. No. Moment lightning strikes, illumination is also there. Tadit and Saudamani. Similarly, in the same way, when the time of death comes, a devotee's body will get transformed into a spiritual body simultaneously. Death will occur, the old material body is given up, simultaneously he acquires an all blissful, all spiritual body, and then he can go back to Godhead. So this is what is awaiting us, and therefore we should engage avyartha kalatvam, as the acharyas have stated. Every second of our life should be engaged in remembering Krishna, in chanting about Krishna, in serving Krishna in some way or the other. And as long as we are engaged like this, we can experience the same thing that Swayambhuva Manu also experienced. So, I'll stop here. If anybody has any questions or comments, we can discuss. So, we'll stop here. Grantharaj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki Jai. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.